too big. Please don't, it hurts down there.
Too big. Please don't. It hurts down there. The words tore from Greta Magnuson's throat as she doubled over the massive boulder in the ranch yard, her giant frame shaking with pain that had nothing to do with the stone beneath her hands. Her husband Jeremiah stood behind her, his calloused hands steady on her waist, holding her up as she broke down in the middle of their Colorado ranch where any passing neighbor could witness her shame. This was their wedding day, less than 3 hours after saying "I do" in front of the whole town, and the giant mail-order bride from Sweden was already falling apart. Not from fear of the wedding night to come, but from something far worse. The crushing weight of a lifetime spent being told she was too much, too big, too impossible for any man to love. "I am sorry," Greta sobbed, her Swedish accent raw with emotion as tears streamed down her face. "I am so sorry, Jeremiah. I cannot be the wife you need. I am too big for everything, too big for your house, too big for your bed, too big for your arms. It hurts down there in my heart because I know I will never fit into your life the way a proper wife should fit." Jeremiah felt her whole body trembling under his hands, felt the way she was trying to hold herself together and failing, and something cracked wide open in his chest. This magnificent woman, this Viking goddess who'd stepped off that stagecoach and stolen his breath, believed she wasn't enough, just like he'd spent 32 years believing the exact same thing about himself. "Greta, look at me," he said, his voice rough with emotion he'd never let anyone see before. But she couldn't. She just gripped that boulder tighter, her knuckles white, her shoulders heaving with sobs she'd probably been holding back since she was a little girl growing up too tall, too strong, too different. What happened in the next 60 seconds would determine everything. Whether Greta would run back to Minnesota on the next stagecoach, whether Jeremiah would let his pride destroy the only chance at love he'd ever have, whether two broken people could find the courage to choose each other despite every reason the world gave them not to. "Do you know why I sent for a mail-order bride?" Jeremiah's voice cut through her sobs. His hands tightened on her waist, anchoring her. "Because no woman in this town would look at me twice. I'm 5'6", Greta, 5'6" in a place where men are measured by how tall they stand and how hard they can hit. My own father used to look at me like I was a disappointment he couldn't fix. The ranch hands called me Little Thornwell behind my back. Women smiled politely and married men who could pick them up, spin them around, make them feel small and protected." He moved closer, his chest against her back, and she could feel him shaking too. "I'm 32 years old, and I've never once felt like enough of a man for anyone. Not until 3 hours ago when you stood beside me in that parlor and said, 'I do,' even though I had to stand on my damn toes to kiss you." Greta's sobs quieted. She could feel his words vibrating through her spine, could hear the pain he'd been carrying just as long as she had. "You think you're too big?" Jeremiah's laugh was bitter, broken. "I think you're perfect. I think you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I'm terrified. Absolutely terrified that tonight when we go into that bedroom, I won't be able to give you what a husband should give his wife, that I'll fail you in the most basic way a man can fail, that you'll realize you married someone too small to be a real man." Greta straightened slowly, her hands still on the boulder but her body no longer collapsing. She turned her head just enough to see his face. His eyes were wet with tears he was trying desperately to hide. "You think you are too small?" she whispered. "And I think I am too big. We are both fools, yes?" "Maybe," Jeremiah said, "or maybe we're exactly what each other needs." The sun was starting to set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. The wind carried the smell of sage and pine, and in that dusty ranch yard, two people who'd never fit anywhere finally looked at each other and saw something neither had ever seen before. Possibility. But the real test was still ahead. Because in just a few hours, they'd have to face that bedroom. That bed, that moment of truth when their bodies would either find a way to fit together or prove that some gaps are just too wide to bridge, and neither of them had any idea which it would be. The bedroom felt smaller with both of them standing in it. The lamp on the dresser cast long shadows that made everything look distorted, unreal. Greta stood by the window, still in her wedding dress, staring out at the darkening mountains like she was memorizing an escape route. Jeremiah closed the door behind them, and the soft click of the latch sounded final as a judge's gavel. "I can sleep in the barn," Jeremiah said, his voice too loud in the quiet room. "Tonight, I mean. Give you time to settle in, get comfortable." "No," Greta's voice was firm, even though her hands were shaking. She turned from the window to face him, and in the lamplight her eyes looked almost fierce. "We are married now. This is what married people do. In Sweden, we do not run from our duties." Duty. The word landed between them like a stone dropped in still water. Jeremiah felt it ripple through him, cold and disappointing. This wasn't how he'd imagined it. Not that he'd imagined much. He'd been too busy being terrified to imagine anything pleasant. But still, duty wasn't the word he wanted to hear on his wedding night. "Let me help with your dress," he said, because he didn't know what else to say, and his hands needed something to do. Greta nodded stiffly and turned her back to him. The buttons ran all the way down her spine, tiny pearl. Things that his fingers fumbled with clumsily. She was so tall that even standing on his toes he had to reach up. He could feel the heat radiating off her skin through the fabric, could smell the lavender soap she'd used to wash that morning, mixed with the clean scent of her sweat and the dust from the yard where she'd broken down crying. His hands shook as he worked the buttons free one by one. "I've never done this before," Greta whispered suddenly. "Been with a man, I mean. In Sweden, they said no man would ever want me because of my size. My sisters, they were all small and pretty and delicate like flowers. They married farmers and blacksmiths, good men with strong hands. But me," her voice cracked, "I was the one who helped with the heavy work, who carried the water barrels, who could lift a full-grown sheep over the fence. The boys in our village, they were afraid of me, or they laughed at me. No one ever looked at me the way a man should look at a woman." Jeremiah's hands stilled on the buttons. "No one ever looked at me the way a woman should look at a man either," he said quietly. "I know what it's like to be the wrong size, to walk into a room and see people's eyes pass right over you like you're not even there. Or worse, to see them notice you and then look away real quick because they're embarrassed for you." The last button came free. Greta's dress gaped open, revealing the pale skin of her back. She clutched the front of it to her chest, holding it up. "What if we cannot do this?" she asked, her voice so small it didn't match her enormous frame. "What if our bodies, they do not fit together the way bodies should fit? What if I hurt you? Or what if you cannot—" She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Then we figure it out," Jeremiah said, though his own stomach was churning with the same fear. "We're married now, Greta. That means we figure things out together." But words were easier than action. When Greta finally let her dress fall to the floor and stood there in her thin cotton shift, Jeremiah felt his courage drain straight out of him. She was magnificent, all long limbs and strong muscles and golden skin that seemed to glow in the lamplight. She was a goddess, and he was just a man too small to reach the top shelf without a stool. They climbed into bed from opposite sides. The mattress dipped under Greta's weight, rolling Jeremiah slightly toward her. He could feel the heat of her body even though they weren't touching, could hear her breathing, fast and shallow with fear. "Maybe if we—" He tried to move closer, tried to find an angle that might work. "Wait," Greta said, but he was already reaching for her, already trying to position himself the way he thought men were supposed to position themselves. "Just let me—" His pride was talking now, the part of him that needed to prove he could do this, that he was man enough despite his size. "Jeremiah, please wait." Greta's voice went higher, more urgent. But he pressed forward anyway, determination overriding caution, and suddenly Greta cried out, a sharp, pained sound that stopped him cold. "Stop! Please stop! It hurts down there! You are pushing wrong! It is too much, please!" Jeremiah jerked back like he'd been burned. Greta curled onto her side away from him, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. In the lamplight, he could see a thin line of blood on the white sheet between them. God Almighty! His hands were shaking violently. "Greta, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I thought I had to just—" "I told you," she said through her tears, her face pressed into the pillow. "I told you I would hurt you, that we would not fit. I am too big. Everything about me is too big. You should send me back. Tell them I was defective. Get your money returned." "Defective?" The word hit him like a slap. "You think you're defective because you're tall?" "I am defective because I cannot even be a proper wife on my wedding night." Greta's voice broke completely. "Because my body is wrong, because I am too much and you are too little, and we are a mistake, Jeremiah. A terrible mistake that should never have happened." Jeremiah stared at her shaking form and felt something fundamental shift inside him. This wasn't about pride anymore. This wasn't about proving he was man enough. This was about the woman he'd married, this brave, terrified woman who'd traveled thousands of miles to marry a stranger, believing she was broken. "Look at me," he said softly. "Greta, please look at me." She turned her tear-streaked face toward him slowly, reluctantly. "You are not defective," Jeremiah said, and he meant every word with everything in him. You are not too big. You are not a mistake. I am the one who messed this up. I was trying to prove something, trying to be something I'm not. And I hurt you. That's not because you're wrong. That's because I was too proud and too stupid to take my time and listen to you. Greta stared at him like she couldn't quite process what he was saying, like no one had ever said words like this to her before. We don't have to do this tonight, Jeremiah continued, his voice gentle. We don't have to do this tomorrow either. We can take as much time as we need to figure out how to be married to each other, because that's what matters, Greta, not whether we can— He gestured helplessly at the bed, not whether our bodies work perfectly together on the first try, but whether we can be kind to each other, whether we can be patient, whether we can see each other as whole people instead of just sizes that don't match up. A sob escaped Greta's throat, but this one sounded different, less like despair and more like relief. Jeremiah reached across the bloody sheet and offered his hand, just his hand, nothing more. Can we try again? Not that. Just this. Just holding hands and maybe talking until we fall asleep, like two people learning each other. Is that okay? Greta looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached across and took it. Her hand swallowed his completely, warm and calloused and trembling slightly. But she held on tight like she was afraid to let go. 3 weeks passed like a slow thaw after a hard winter. 3 weeks of sleeping in the same bed, but not touching beyond holding hands in the darkness. 3 weeks of learning each other in smaller, safer ways that didn't involve their bodies trying to fit together in ways that brought pain. Jeremiah discovered that Greta sang Swedish hymns while she worked in the kitchen, her voice low and beautiful like distant thunder. That she made bread so good it could make a grown man weep. That she was terrified of spiders despite being able to lift a hay bale over her head without breaking a sweat. That she laughed at his terrible jokes even when they weren't funny, and the sound of that laugh did something to his chest that he couldn't quite name. Greta discovered that Jeremiah was gentle with the horses in a way that made them trust him instantly, that he could track a wounded animal across 3 miles of rocky ground just by reading signs in the dirt, that he carved little wooden animals when he thought no one was watching, his small hands precise and careful, that he looked at her sometimes like she was something precious, and it made her throat tight with emotions she'd never felt before. They worked the ranch together. Greta could do the heavy lifting, hauling water, moving fence posts, throwing hay bales like they weighed nothing. Jeremiah handled the delicate work, gentling the horses, tending sick calves, making the 1,000 small decisions that kept a ranch running. His ranch hands, Dusty and Hank, took to Greta immediately. She arm-wrestled Dusty one afternoon and won, and instead of being embarrassed, he'd laughed so hard he nearly fell off his chair. But at night, when they lay in that bed in the darkness, the unspoken thing between them grew heavier. They were married in name, but not in truth. They held hands like children afraid of the dark, but they didn't touch in the ways husbands and wives were supposed to touch. And Jeremiah could feel Greta pulling further away each day, like she was building walls he couldn't see. Then Vernon Pritchard came back. It happened on a Tuesday morning when Jeremiah was in the north pasture mending fence alone. He heard horses before he saw them, 6 riders fanning out in a semicircle around him. Pritchard sat in the middle on his big bay gelding, a mean smile on his weathered face. Time to discuss those water rights again, Thornwell, Pritchard said, his men spreading wider to cut off any escape route. You sign over peaceful, or things get unpleasant real fast. Jeremiah's hand moved toward his rifle leaning against the fence post, but one of Pritchard's men was faster, kicking it away into the dirt. Now, no need for that. Just sign the paper and we'll be on our way. Not signing, Jeremiah said, keeping his voice steady despite his hammering heart. This is my land, Pritchard. My water. You want it, you'll have to— The first punch came from his blind side, dropping him hard into the dust. Then boots and fists, and Jeremiah curled up trying to protect his head while they worked him over methodically. He tasted blood in his mouth, felt ribs cracking, knew this was bad but couldn't do anything to stop it. He didn't hear Greta coming. None of them did. But suddenly, the beating stopped. Jeremiah looked up through swelling eyes to see his wife standing over him like an avenging angel. She'd grabbed a fence post, a whole fence post, 6 feet of solid wood, and was holding it like a club. 2 of Pritchard's men were already on the ground groaning. The others were backing their horses away from this furious Swedish giant. You touch my husband again, Greta said, her voice low and deadly, her accent thicker than Jeremiah had ever heard it. And I break every bone in your coward bodies, all of you, one at a time or all together, I do not care which." "She's just a woman," one of Pritchard's men started to say. "I am farmer's daughter from Sweden where winter kills weak men like you," Greta snarled. She swung the fence post experimentally, and they all flinched. "I am wife defending home. I am wife defending husband, and I am done being afraid of men who think size is all that matters." She took a step forward, and two more men scrambled backward. "You leave now. You do not come back. You tell everyone in Copper Ridge that Thornwell Ranch is protected. You understand?" Pritchard's face went red with rage, but he wasn't stupid enough to challenge a woman holding a fence post like a weapon and looking ready to use it. "This ain't over," he spat. "Yes," Greta said quietly, definitively. "It is." They left at a gallop, dust rising behind them like cowards fleeing a battle they'd lost before it started. Greta dropped the fence post and fell to her knees beside Jeremiah, her hands shaking as they moved over his face, his ribs checking for damage. "Can you stand? Please tell me you can stand. Please tell me nothing is broken." "I can stand," Jeremiah managed, though it hurt like hell. But when he tried, his legs wouldn't hold him. Greta didn't hesitate. She picked him up, actually picked him up like he weighed nothing, and carried him to the wagon. Any other day, being carried by his wife might have destroyed what was left of his pride. Today, it felt like salvation. Prudence came running when she saw them coming up the road, Jeremiah cradled in Greta's arms like a child. The older woman's face went pale. "Get him inside. I'll fetch my medical kit." They laid him on the bed. Prudence worked efficiently, cleaning cuts and checking ribs while Greta paced the room like a caged animal, her hands opening and closing like she wanted to hit something. "Nothing broken," Prudence finally announced, "but you're going to be sore for weeks, Jeremiah. Those men meant business." "They meant murder," Greta said, her voice shaking with rage and fear. "I should have killed them. I should have—" "You saved me," Jeremiah said through split lips. "That's what you did." After Prudence left, promising to check back in the morning, Jeremiah lay in the bed watching his wife pace. She was magnificent in her fury, all that strength and power finally unleashed, finally used for something that mattered. She'd defended him, protected him, fought for him when he couldn't fight for himself. "Greta, come here." She came to the bedside but wouldn't sit, just stood there with her arms crossed, her jaw tight. "I was so frightened," she whispered. "When I saw them hurting you, I thought they would kill you, and I realized that I cannot lose you. Not now, not when I am just learning what it means to have someone who looks at me like I am not too much, like I am exactly right." "You are exactly right," Jeremiah said. He reached for her hand and pulled her down to sit on the bed's edge. "You showed me something today, Greta, something I needed to see." "What?" "That strength comes in different forms. I'll never be physically strong like you. Never be able to fight off 6 men or lift fence posts like they're kindling, but you'll never track like I can, never have the patience with animals that I do. We all have our strengths, our place." He squeezed her hand. "Our perfect fit." Tears spilled down Greta's cheeks. "You think I fit with you?" "I think you were made for me," Jeremiah said. "And I think we've been so busy being afraid of our bodies not matching up that we forgot our hearts already do." Something shifted in Greta's expression. Something opened that had been closed since their disastrous wedding night. She looked at her husband, bruised and battered and still smaller than her, and saw him clearly for the first time. Not as a disappointment, not as proof of her own wrongness, but as a man brave enough to be vulnerable with her, strong enough to admit weakness, whole enough to see her as whole too. "I want to try again," she whispered, but slowly this time, carefully, like we are learning a new language together. Jeremiah smiled despite his split lip. "I'd like that." That night they started over, not with desperation or duty or pride, but with patience, with tenderness, with the understanding that some things can't be rushed and the most important connections take time to build right. Jeremiah lay still while his ribs healed, but his hands were gentle as they explored the geography of his wife's body, learning where she was sensitive, where she carried tension, where touch made her sigh instead of flinch. Greta learned that intimacy wasn't about force or fitting perfectly on the first try. It was about listening, adjusting, finding the angles that worked for both of them instead of the ones the world said should work. They talked through it, laughed through the awkward parts, stopped when something hurt and tried a different way. Greta on her side with Jeremiah curved behind her. That worked better, her long legs tangled with his shorter ones, and somehow it felt right instead of wrong. His hands could reach everywhere they needed to reach. Her body relaxed into his touch instead of tensing against it. "Too much?" he whispered against her shoulder. "No," she breathed. "Not too much, not too little. Just right." When they finally came together, really came together, it wasn't the explosive passion of storybooks. It was something quieter, deeper. Two people who'd spent their whole lives being the wrong size, finally finding someone who fit them exactly as they were. Greta cried, but not from pain this time, from relief, from joy, from the overwhelming realization that she was enough, that her body wasn't defective, that love could exist even when everything looked wrong from the outside. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the lamplight, Jeremiah's head resting on Greta's shoulder, her long legs wrapped around his smaller frame like she was trying to keep him safe from the whole world. "I never thought I could have this," Greta whispered into the darkness, "a husband who sees me as a woman, a home where I do not have to make myself smaller, a place where I fit." "You fit perfectly," Jeremiah said, pressing a kiss to her collarbone. "Always did. We just had to figure out how." Outside, the Colorado stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant and uncaring. But inside that small ranch house, two people who'd never fit anywhere had finally found where they belonged, in each other's arms, perfectly matched despite every odd stacked against them. The Thornwell Ranch would prosper in the years to come. Vernon Pritchard would never bother them again after word spread about the giant bride who'd driven off 6 armed men with nothing but a fence post and fury. The town of Copper Ridge would eventually stop whispering and start telling the story differently. Not as a joke about mismatched sizes, but as proof that real love finds a way when two people are brave enough to be vulnerable together. And Greta and Jeremiah, they'd build a life that had nothing to do with being too big or too small. They'd build a life that was exactly the right size for two hearts that had finally found their perfect fit. Because in the end, that's what mattered. Not inches or expectations, or what the world thought should work, just two people choosing each other every single day, through pain and fear and shame, through awkwardness and failure and trying again, until they found their way to something most people spend their whole lives searching for, a love that sees them exactly as they are and says, "Yes, you are enough." If this story touched your heart, hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next emotional journey. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We love hearing from you.